after a lot of talking, I got a hold of some bodies from the AC people, and Ford agreed to help me build a new sport car I call the Cobra. The rest is in the record books. The new Ford-powered Cobras beat just about everything in sight. We took our new Ford-powered Cobra across the pond. And for the first time in a long time, Europe saw American race cars winning. There's a lot of designing, testing, and trial runs behind every new innovation or new performance record. How do I know? My name's Carroll Shelby, and performance is my business.
I still remember the first time sitting in a 427 Cobra. It was in the mid-'80s, and we were at the Dearborn Shelby convention, and there was a bunch of Cobras there, 427s, 289s, and my wife turned to me and said, "I thought you told me these cars are rare." And I said, "They are rare," but there was just a row of them, and said, "One day I'm gonna own one of these." And now 40 years later, I don't know how many we've owned, but it's a lot. It's 60, 70, 80 of these cars, and restored even more of them. So there's still a lot of mystique. Everybody knows the story of Carroll Shelby and the race history and, you know, everything that he did. But 427s have this really interesting appeal to them. People don't understand how different a lot of these cars were from one another. Everybody thinks of a 427, but really there's like 5 iterations of 427s. And they didn't call them anything really different. Well, the comp cars they did. So the first 55 cars roughly, competition cars and prototypes and all that sort of stuff, they couldn't sell them as full competition cars, and those are the ones that everybody thinks of. Came with the hood scoop, the roll bar, the side pipes, the 427 side oiler, the turkey pan. Those first bunch of cars that they went racing with, there's really only 2 team cars. One is the prototype Ken Miles car, and the other is the first 4-inch tube chassis Ken Miles car. The rest of the cars were pretty much independent cars. Those first bunch of cars are what everybody builds the replicas from. Hood scoop, side pipes, roll bars, no glove box door, the Hellebrand wheels, you know, the oil cooler, all of that stuff, really cool. But they had trouble selling those cars. They were expensive cars. Into 66 here, they said, we got all these leftover unpainted cars. What are we gonna do with them? And then somebody came up with the bright idea, let's call them semi-comp cars or semi-street cars. So semi-comp cars, SC cars, were basically full competition cars that they gave a little bit more wheel clearance in the back, so they rolled the flare up a little bit more, still had the hood scoop, the roll bar, still had the 427 side oiler. They put 2 4-barrels on most SC cars, which a lot of guys don't understand that, and they end up putting the turkey pan on. It's correct with the 2 4-barrels. Then the next thing they said is, well, let's build a street version of those cars. So they started out, same basic body, flares are a little different, but you can see the flare in the back. It looks way too big for the wheel. So those first 25, 30 cars had this great big flare, and then they said, let's make it more narrow. So the next 33 cars became narrow hip cars. And what they did is they really started here and they just kind of cut this much of the car off, and it looked like kind of like a 289 in the back and a 427 in the front. Those 33 cars, people decided, it still doesn't look right, and they went back to the wide flare. So those flares changed over the, you know, the different serial numbers. Then there was the whole deal about the engines. So the first 100 street cars, 3101 to 3200, had 427, 2 4-barrels, center oilers. From 3201 to roughly 3305, in around those numbers, they're not exact, you'd have to get the actual paperwork because sometimes they slipped one in. Those cars had 428s. And a lot of people said that was Shelby trying to save a couple bucks, but he still badged them as 427 on the side of the car and really never said much, but they had less horsepower. They were good, reliable, still torquey motors, lots of torque, but they weren't 427s. Then the next, roughly call it 60 cars or 55 cars, depending what, you know, everybody has a different version of it. Those cars were 427 side oilers, but only with a single 4-barrel instead of the 2 4s. And also the 428s had a single 4, not the 2 4s. So there's really only 100 road cars with the 2 4-barrels. I think it's the best looking engine bay out there. It just looks spectacular. I mean, a giant motor with realistically 500 horsepower stuffed into a car that weighs about 2,500 pounds. That's where you get all the performance. Almost all of the cars, there were a few automatics, but almost all of the cars had 4-speed top loaders, and all of them had Salisbury rear ends in it, independent. All of the 427 cars, other than the prototype Ken Miles' car, the flip top, had a 4-inch tube chassis. It made it more rigid, made it a little bit stronger. You had a little bit less flex in the chassis, and it also came with what I think is the best advancement. And a lot of people love their 289s with their buggy springs in the front, but I really like a coil spring car. You can adjust the ride height. It's a lot nicer ride. The car feels a lot better just going down the road. Now, as far as performance goes, let's face it, 427 with all that horsepower and all that torque made this thing just a rocket ship. 289 hypos were no slouches either, but these cars were never really developed the way the 289 race cars were, because Shelby really wasn't involved that much anymore. He was off to the GT40 program. So let's look at the hierarchy of 427 cars. Let's call it, there's 260 road cars. There was roughly 50 competition cars, plus some prototypes and spare chassis and things, and the SC cars. So the top of the heap would probably be the competition cars and the SC cars. They're basically the same car. So let's go back to the road car. The 427, whether it's an early car with the 2 4-barrels, or it's a late car with the single 4 but a side oiler, they're roughly the same money. They have roughly the same body shape as far as the rear flare goes. They change over from the sort of the 289 lights to the 2 round lights in the back. But really, from a value point of view, there isn't much difference, and it's just preference. Some people like the single 4, some people like the 2 4. The 33 narrow hip cars, that's an interesting story too. Some people love the look of the narrow hip, and it used to be that they brought less money. Now to the right guy, sometimes they bring a premium, but it's all personal preference. But let's just say that's semantics. Everybody that has a real 427 in their Cobra, they're valued roughly the same. The 428 cars from 3201 to call it 3305 or in around those numbers, those cars are worth less money because they don't have the same performance. And up until about 10 years ago, nobody really knew or nobody really cared. They brought roughly the same money. Now it's become more important. And it's funny, as time goes on, what becomes even more important is so many of these cars, like early Ferraris, like fiberglass Porsches, 904s, 906s, like Lamborghini Miuras, like a lot of those cars led very, very hard lives. And a lot of people modified those cars. If you go back into the 50s and 60s Ferraris, you'd be shocked at how many of those cars had small block Chevys in them at one point. So a lot of those cars were beat on, blown up, put away wet, and then later restored again. Cobras were no different. A lot of cars were really hurt in road accidents, and then a lot of cars were really kind of bastardized because the big thing was everybody wanted that 427 comp or the SC look. So everybody was doing that to their road cars. Instead of spending, you know, double the money on a competition car or an SC car, they would simply put on a hood scoop, cut a hole in it, put on the side pipes, cut holes in the side, put on a roll bar, cut a hole in it. So they started cutting up virgin street cars, changing the flares, changing the hood scoop, doing all that stuff, and beating on them pretty hard. A lot of the 428 cars had 427 stuck in them. So in today's world, what becomes really, really important is cars that are unmolested, and you can count those on a couple of hands. So cars that have never had a hood scoop, never had a roll bar, never had side pipes, never had holes cut in the body, have never been damaged, still have their original motors, trannies, and rear ends and chassis. They are ultra, ultra rare. And what a lot of people see, and it's hard to explain to people, you go to an auction and you see, 3,200 car with a 428 that now is a 427 that had a crash, that has all of the SC stuff on it, and it sells for $1 million, and people go, oh, why did that go so cheap? Well, they're not comparing apples to apples. So in today's world, the top of the heap still are the competition in the SC cars. And again, there's a hierarchy there. The cars that have their original bodies, that have never been crashed, that have never been burned, the rare ones that still have their original motors after being raced, they bring a premium. The road cars, the 427s, they definitely bring a premium, but more importantly, people are getting all excited about how pure is the car. And the nice thing is, the Shelby registry has a really good history, and not everything in the registry is 100% true. A lot of it is what people wrote, but a lot of it is pretty accurate, or there's some truths to it. So when you see a car and you think it went cheap, if you really dig into it, 99% of the time, there's a reason why. And the price difference between that car that's had some trauma and now has a hood scoop and a roll bar and side pipes, but was originally a 428 car, now has a 427 in it, that car can bring half or a third of the value of a super pure, highly restored car. And like a lot of the cars in today's world, the quality of the restorations have started going over the top. This is one of those cars we just finished, and the guy was really hung up about having one of the best, so he had to start with a virgin car. Never had a hood scoop, roll bar, side pipes, never had any body damage. Underneath this car, when we look at the welds are textbook. They're perfect. Car really has never even had a ding in the car. Motor, original tranny, original rear end, really important to the guy. Then it came to the restoration, and we basically had an open checkbook to do this. He wanted the car perfect, but left the original seat covers on the car because he loves the fact that they were the original skins. And I really like that too. He wanted all the original rivets in the car, so we didn't actually peel the body off the frame like we would do with some of the rougher cars. Has all the original rivets, has all the original fiberglass, the foot boxes and the trunk, all the original pieces on it. And then we went through and put a bunch of NOS parts on this car. And then the quality of the restoration, the levels have just gone up and up and up, like all cars. So a restoration that was done this year compared to one that we even did 10 years ago, they're on two different levels. So this is one of, I would say, a handful of cars that have never had trauma, never had body modifications, have all their original drivetrain, and have this level of restoration. This is the top of the heap for the road cars. So normally this is where I would drive the car, but this car is so fresh that when we fired it up and drove over here, you could smell, the paint sort of warming up on the engine and all that. And he wants to preserve it like this. At some point after he shows it, maybe he's going to start driving the car. But I'll tell you what, one of my best days driving a Cobra is when we had just finished the Shelby car, and it was his personal car from new until he passed away. We bought it at auction and we restored the car 100%. And talk about hierarchy, that is, the peak, the top of the heap. We sold that car for almost $6 million just because of its special history. It was a super, super cool color and special car. But spending the day in that car reminded me of the first day I sat in that blue Cobra at the Shelby convention in Dearborn. The cars are wonderful cars to drive. People say, oh, they're brutes, they're this, they're that. It's only how hard you push that gas pedal. It's a really fun car. They handle extremely well, rack and pinion, independent suspension. They don't run hot if you really build a good radiator for it and make sure your radiator is fresh. You do have to put an aftermarket fan because that little, mailbox fan in the front isn't going to cut it if you get stuck in any traffic. But once you get moving, there's plenty of airflow through there. You don't have to worry about overheating those things. The top loader transmission is one of the toughest transmissions they ever built. They're really dependable, they drive really nice, they work really well, and they're tough. It's a really usable package. Unlike some exotic cars, you know, this car you could drive a lot, and on the Cobra tours where they only allow real cars, you know, 50, 60 guys get together, they go 1,000 miles. There's a great photo of all the guys getting stuck in the mountain, in the snow, tops off. Guys use the car. There's no reason you can't take one of these cars and put thousands and thousands of miles on it. They're very dependable, very usable. So if you're looking for the blue chippers, it's got to be either a super original car, original paint, original tires, original drivetrain with no trauma, or it's got to be a super restored car like this car here, and again, with original drivetrain, original body, original chassis, and then a stunning restoration with no stories and no traumas. Those cars will be the true blue chippers of all the Cobras.